Hello, everyone. We're back with the Simply Trade podcast, the news roundup. Hopefully it's Monday when you're listening to this because that's when our news come out and you want to be educated. You want to know what's going on because we have something really, I don't know if it's exciting to talk about, but it's something to talk about. But before we start, I want everyone to know that Simply Trade and Global Training Center and everyone involved with our organization's hearts go out to the affected in California. We see the pictures, we see the videos, and it's just terrifying. And I can't fathom such devastations and such loss people and animals are going through right now and having to rebuild. And, all these firefighters really putting their lives on the line and doing everything they can to save their homes and their cities, their parts where they're living and they lost everything. So we just want to send extend our hearts to these people. I don't know, this gets me emotional. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. But if you're listening from California, we're with you. And we're sending all the positive and good and strong vibes over there. And if you want to donate, you can. There's multiple resources. I'll actually put some resources on our LinkedIn. Just if anyone is looking to donate or do something good. And so from that, moving on, it can only get better from this topic. So we're moving on because I have a special guest with me today in the studio. So fun. She's been on the podcast a couple of times. I would say she's a trade expert. You're also a CEO, correct? So we have Kim Campbell in the studio, right from Canada. Good morning. Yeah, it is morning when we're recording this. I'm not sure when you're listening to this. It might be evening, but for us right now, it is morning. And I have mentioned that Kim is from Canada, and that might give you a little bit of an input on what we're talking about today, which is the mess that's going on in Canada. So you guys have just lost your prime minister, correct?
Well, he's still in place, but he has officially announced his resignation. So we will have him until March 9th.
All right. So March 9th. And then do you know already who is next or what's going on with that?
Zero clue. So really kind of a little bit like the US side. So first of all, I also would like to send my best vibes out too. It's really heartbreaking to see what's happening on with our neighbors in the south on the California side. I'm very happy that we are sending a lot of resources, and I know our Prime Minister just attending the recent funeral with former the late Jimmy Carter announced that we were sending quite a few resources. So we're actually mobilizing 7,500 resources and a lot of our planes, because unfortunately we ourselves have had a lot of experience recently with massive fires. So like good neighbors, we obviously want to help our neighbors when they're in times of need. So I know our Canadian forces, our resources have been are probably there actually right now, because I know that was enacted a couple days ago now. So always happy to help. Yes.
Only seen videos just yesterday. A lot of Mexico sent a lot of helicopters to the water ones and a lot of firefighters as well. Which you don't hear this often. This kind of this extent of a fire, right, that is happening, and then that Mexico and Canada is coming together and helping the US. I feel like that just shows how much you have to be a good neighbor for these things to happen, and how we help each other. And hopefully that will be the same moving forward, because there's a lot of change coming in for the US as well. But I know we're talking about Canada right now, but I think it all comes together at the end, what will happen in the future, especially with 2 new presidents now.
Yes. And I think like a couple of things too, kind of this, disaster kind of keeps it in perspective, because we know the next few months are going to be very challenging, as we're not sure what's going to happen with tariff retaliation and folks in our industry, and obviously people that are importing across the borders. I know the level of angst that's occurring out there and people trying to prepare with war rooms and things like that as they try and triage the information. So, seeing folks really in distress kind of keeps it in perspective in terms of anything we might be facing. And also, too, it does really kind of validate why we do need each other in not only in times of trouble, but working together to make this the safest and most prosperous trading bloc. So, I guess that's the one piece to keep that, maybe the world is reminding us a little bit about that as we move into negotiations.
Yeah. And to that, I want to kind of jump into the trade implications that are, that might be happening or that we might be foreseeing right now. So where does it look on your side right now? When you're talking trade, you will have a new prime minister, hopefully by March, but right now you're still kind of undergoing with the same rules and the same, concept that Trudeau has. So what is your stance right now in the trade industry? Like, what is going on behind the scenes? How are people reacting?
That's a really good, great question. And, although I might be a trade expert, I'm kind of just amateur geopolitical aficionado. So I can give you my perspective from that way, but obviously it's much more complicated, and there's a lot of other people that could probably talk a little bit about maneuvering, about how it all works. But really what's happened is not only when his resignation was announced, we call it proroguing our government, which is terms that the U.S. aren't familiar with. But basically what that means is the government kind of stops working holistically. That doesn't mean that the government is still working. There's some funding that's already been set there. But what it does mean is all the parliamentary committees stop, which and all the elected officials stop doing their good work. So it's kind of an unsettling time knowing we're in this period with, a new president being sworn in a week or so, and has been very clear about stating that there will be tariffs coming out of the gate. And so just that part, I think Canadians are just like kind of a little bit, it's unsettling. Let's just put it that way. I have no doubt that our ministers that are currently in, and our prime minister and our provincial officials, kind of like your governors, are working very hard behind the scenes to make sure that we get the best outcome here. But a lot of that stuff is hard for us to figure out just because of the situation of this proroguing. So once the new leader is named, they will by de facto become the new prime minister. But we expect that our government will put forward what's called a non-confidence motion, probably when they reconvene, which is on March the 24th, that will probably force an election. So once that happens, that's another series of events that happens. Right now, legally, we have to have one by October 20th, 2025. Probably the sitting party that's picking a new leader would like it to go as long as they can, because obviously we'll be dealing with somebody we don't know. And it's, the U.S. saw this as well recently, where the leader was put in very last minute, and then to try and run election campaign is very difficult. So in our system, you can change, things can change up depending on what's going on. So we don't necessarily will be going to the polls in October. We could be actually seeing it in the summer. So that's why I say it's kind of an unknown period and not really sure. I think probably generally most Canadians would tell you it won't really matter who the leader is that is selected. We expect that our government will change. And if you just look at the opinion polls, it's pretty clear that we will have a new prime minister, and probably from the Conservative Party.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So how do you think that'll affect, or will that have an effect on the trade, like some trade policies or trade regulations, or just anything on the trade perspective where people, that are in the industry have to make some adjustments or get maybe more training on this, or, to understand a little bit more what, can happen to their businesses? What do you think will happen with that?
So I think twofold. One is obviously the Conservative Party would be more closely aligned philosophically to President Trump's administration. But at the end of the day, the topic is basically the same in terms of what the issues are. And I'm not sure that core issue will change depending on who's in power. It will just be probably maybe the approach that might slightly change, but I doubt it. because I think Canadians will definitely want to make sure that we are looking after ourselves in any kind of response. So we can certainly talk about what happened the last time. The last time what happened was when we had retaliation tariffs in 2018. It was aligned around steel and aluminum because it was a Section 232 retaliation that came in. And so basically what the Canadian government did is looked at the exact amount. And as we know, soon to be President Trump is very specific in terms of what he feels is trade deficits. The issue is specific numbers. So whatever there was going to be damage to our industries, we kind of countered it penny to the penny on our side. So in addition to the steel and aluminum, because it didn't make up the full amount, we threw in other products. So like there was crazy stuff on there like ketchup and honey and playing cards and whiskey and all those things, yogurt. So initially you would say, what the heck is that about? But we kind of were a little bit strategic in terms of how we applied the tariff. So that's kind of one of the big things when you ask what should industry be thinking about. That was the one big lesson and surprise that we had last time around. We thought it was going to be one-to-one retaliation, but it wasn't. It was all this new kind of product that was thrown into the mix that nobody kind of saw coming. And so what the Canadian government did is they took a look at like big US companies that had moved manufacturing out of Canada and then specifically looked at their products. For example, that's what happened with ketchup and mustard. There was a very large Canadian, US company that was producing in Canada pulled out. So those products were then targeted. The other thing that was targeted too is from key states, key Republican states, products that were their biggest exporters. Because, you know, we don't necessarily always talk about is the US's number one customer. So we buy a lot of products from the United States. So when we start saying we're not going to buy those products, obviously that's impacting US jobs. And so those were strategically decided too. That's why we saw yogurt with Mr. Ryan State and whiskey with Mr. McConnell State. So that's what people kind of have to think about as we're thinking about what could be the retaliation. Because now the number that we're hearing is, I think it's like 8 to 9 times bigger than the previous in terms of what the US is considering. So that would make you think, okay, that is a lot of more product. Because a lot of companies didn't have any touch to tariffs last time. Just the way the segmenting was for their product space. But now, because we're going to have to make up this bigger difference, you know, a lot more people could be impacted now. And we're talking 25%. Last time it was 10%. So, I think there was some 25% on some of the, steel stuff, but for the most part, it was 10. So now US is automatically saying 25. So when you start thinking about it that way, like this is a whole new situation. And then, you know, even from a numbers perspective, we're even like talking about other things. Like I know our premiers, like the US state governors are looking at other things too, because we do a lot of energy transfer. There's other commodity things that might go on that might not be so obvious that it seems like everything's on there.
Yeah. And, you know, hearing that, it's just a little bit, to me, I'm not a trade expert and I'm not saying I ever would be. But when we look at what you just said and, you know, how the US is reacting and, you know, what will happen on Canada's side is the same thing that'll happen on the US side. Because just because we're saying we're putting the tariffs on you guys, you know, these are the tariffs you're going to have to pay and this is how it's going to affect you. I mean, looking at the United States, we will be so affected by that, by our own doings, really. So in that sense, I really hope it can be challenged a little bit different. Like, I don't know how he would make that happen. I think it would tremendously affect the US and, you know, all the consumers. And, you know, what we want here or what people want, what it seems like they want lower prices and with higher tariffs, there will never be lower prices.
Well, you raised such a good point because it's kind of twofold, right? It's like if we're leveraging 25% on Canadian goods going to the US, like at the end of the day, it's the importer of record that pays the duties and taxes. And in most cases, it's going to be a U.S. company. It's not the Canadian company that's paying the import duties, unless, of course, you're a non-resident. And for people following this podcast, they know what that means. Most won't know what non-resident means, but for the most part, it's going to be a U.S. company that's paying the surtax, which is obviously going to be pushed onto the consumer. I think last time on the Canadian side specifically, a lot of companies probably could absorb 10%, like not great, but could do it. But 25%, I don't know. I just think that's going to have to be, there's definitely going to have to be a price thing. The other thing too is just from a Canadian perspective, the other way. So when we start to retaliate, those costs will go up as well. And on the Canadian side is a little bit, I feel, further exasperated because our exchange rate is against the US dollar is so difficult. So not only do we have an exchange rate issue, then to layer on this additional amount, like people are going to start looking for other places to get their goods.
Yeah. And that's even worse.
Right. And then that impacts the US worker, obviously, because US jobs are created to make products that are being shipped to Canada. Because again, we are your number one customer. So of, a lot of things. So, in a lot of states we know would probably go bankrupt if Canadians stop buying products.
100%. And we talked in the very beginning, we talked about taking care of our neighbors because those are the ones that are going to help you in hard times. And that's in real life really too. So, when we look at that on a country perspective, then I think that's something we have to nurture, and we'll have to see what will happen in that sense. When I was in Berlin, I went to go watch the Berlin Wall, and there was a saying on there, and it's like, history shouldn't repeat itself, so let's never let it happen again because of what happened in Germany at that time. And I think when I went through all those history lessons and over there in Berlin and just kind of got to know more about what happened, I'm like, we should really apply that in all senses of, government, politics. I know it's easier said than done, but it seems like no one is really doing that in politics. Like we're not like, we already did the whole tariff thing. It didn't work out. Why are we doing this again? Even worse. Like, I don't really understand how,
You raised such a good question because I have had the privilege of traveling the world, and I'm always gobsmacked how human beings continue to repeat the same mistake.
Yeah, it's really eye-opening. It's so eye-opening. When I went, I'm like, because I'm open, and there's so many different layers to politics, and I don't really understand it, and but some things I do question. And then when I go to places and read those things, I'm like, that's so weird. Like, why are we doing this? So it just puts things in perspective. And I do have a question for you too. We last episode, no, I think it was 2 episodes ago, we talked on border security from Canada. I think you put 1.3 billion into border security. That has to do with agents and I don't know, securing the border, having more, I don't know if it's regulations or checks. I'm not sure what it entailed. But does that have an effect with the whole new system that you guys are, or not new system, but the changes that you guys are going through? Will that have will that be changed, or will that still stand? Or how does that affect you guys, like the trade industry? Is there more, more scrutiny or regulations that have to be looked at?
That's a great question. I think I think it's twofold, and people on trade know this. There's always the health, safety, and security part, which is the border process itself. Goods moving from one place to another across a border. Then there's the other part of it which is the tariff and classifications. Are all those done right? Free trade agreements, which is probably more the economic piece of it. They're kind of separate, obviously very connected. But I think most of this recent announcement is around the border security issue. And, that is one thing I feel like, President-elect Trump, who will be in a couple of weeks, I think he's given us, I think he's got a lot of valid points there. Like there's some work to be done. And so, I applaud him raising these issues. I do think that the world is changing in terms of what we should all be thinking and considering. And, I understand why we have to work together and be more aware and play our part in Canada, because we're an entry point for things that might come through our country down into the United States. So I think that was mostly the thinking around that package is on the security part. More technology at the border, especially on the fentanyl file, more automation around, being able to look at things more quickly, through X-ray and stuff like that. We probably have needed to invest in that kind of thing. More officers. We definitely have not had enough officers probably hired for many years, but I can say that CBSA has been doing a lot of good work in the last year and a half trying to get new officers in. We see the graduations happening all the time, which is great, but I think there will be more in addition to that. All good things. I think the other interesting thing that definitely I'm starting to hear our government speak about and our border officials speak about, which I think USCBP has done an amazing job for a long time, is private and government partnerships to address issues. So we haven't been so good about that on our side of the fence, but I definitely have now seen that there's an interest to maybe have discussions more about how does the private sector and the government work together on the fentanyl file and other things. So I just think that right now our security profile within the North American space is so complicated that our law enforcement agencies just can't do it on their own anymore. They need private sector engagement and our knowledge and our active eyes and sharing of information and doing things to support the cause. So I think that's what that package is more about. And we're very happy that our government stepped up because that's been things that we've even noticed on our side. So that was a good, I think, call out. And we look forward to leveraging the U.S. great experience and then our partnerships amongst ourselves to make sure that we can make that border much more secure.
Yeah, because when I read that, I was like, well, it seems like Canada is doing everything that we're asking for, or, not we're, that the president-elect is asking for. And so, in my head, I was like, well, there's no need to apply these tariffs now. I mean, if they're securing the border, that's all we're wanting, right? I mean, but who knows what will come next week. Kind of exciting, right? Because it's the unknown is a little bit exciting because we don't know. Like, is it going to be terrible? Is it going to be great? Like, we don't know. So that's kind of exciting. But I want to ask you like a final question, more to advice to Canadian businesses and maybe consumers, like navigating these times right now and this kind of uncertainty. Is there any advice that you have?
Yeah, I think one is our reflection right now is that maybe U.S. businesses don't know how they might be impacted. So it's even not just a Canadian thing. I think it's a U.S. thing because I think everyone's focused on, the U.S. is going to retaliate. But okay, so Canada's going to do a counter. So are you ready and prepared that your products might be impacted? Because we certainly saw that last time. People were just like, oh, it's a steel and aluminum issue and weren't prepared at all for any impact. So I think generally we would have to say Canada has to be prepared, and we are preparing that, and we take President Trump at his word that we're going to have to deal with tariffs like sooner than later. And so I think, if he has been saying he might be signing executive orders the next day after he's in. So we have to be prepared. It could be even by the end of January, we're going to be having to deal with a tariff situation.
Have you been seeing mass shipments? Because I know they talked about that people are trying to get those imports in rather than later, like just pushing them out. Is this something that you're seeing right now ahead of these?
I am not aware of that, but I would not be surprised if people are doing that because I think it depends on people's level of understanding and engagement around the issue too. Like I definitely know some colleagues that were impacted before that are definitely trying to get stuff in.
Okay. All right.
For sure. Yeah.
And that, I have no further questions. I think we kind of covered it all. We might have to meet again after all this unfolds, like maybe in March, because or who knows, maybe even, in February.
Well, I think we're going to do some IE Canada webinars. We're going to maybe do one a month, so we could certainly keep that as a standing item. I guess, like, just now that we're talking, your great question about what can people do, I would say if you're a Canadian importer, like, connect to any of your associations, because obviously we're all hands on deck right now, waiting for lists, waiting to understand. So I know last time around, many of our importing community worked, leaned in, especially to one of the ones I'm affiliated with the most, i.e. Canada. And not only did we work through things, but it was also a good kind of way to be with a group of people that are in the same boat, swimming together, trying to figure it all out. So I would definitely say that, we're hearing that Canada might release a potential list today, as early as today. Many of us don't know if that's going to happen because we're kind of curious as to why we would release a list if we don't even know we're going to have tariffs yet. So, but based on what happened before, as soon as we did have edicts on the U.S. side, our lists were released very, very quickly. So, they will be published on the Canadian sites so very, very quickly. If we go down that path, I'm like you. I'm hoping that we're not going to go there initially because we're negotiating some outcomes. So, but we have to at this point be prepared for that scenario. And so that would be some of my other suggestions as well.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, I'm going to go off the trade. I'm going to spin from the trade a little bit. So I was watching, I know, Carter's funeral was just yesterday. I don't know. There was lots of videos. He seemed like he was in a very good mood, the president-elect, and he got to talk with Obama. And it's funny because there's so many videos out there, and I'm a Gen Z, so I love my little TikTok videos. Who knows what will happen with TikTok? We don't know that yet either. But and there's just so many videos, and I'm like, he seems nice. He seems better. He seems more in good light. I'm like, there won't be tariffs. No, there won't be. And it's just so funny. I'm like, why is that in my head? Like, why am I thinking that way? But who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. But it's just funny because I'm watching these little videos.
I know. You're trying to read the tea leaves, right? So
yeah, I'm trying to read the room, see what the vibes are on the side. Like, are we all friends? Are we not? Like, what's the deal?
I'm not going to lie. I myself really enjoyed that, people coming in and out of that yesterday.
Yeah, it's funny. It's just, to me, it's funny. I mean, this is all very serious stuff, and we could be impacted tremendously on either side. And let's hope that won't happen. And if you're listening, as a listener, I hope you're getting something away, like as a consumer as well. And obviously, if you're in the trade industry, you kind of already know what's happening and what could potentially happen. But I hope you take this little advice from Kim and get involved and just be proactive in this sense.
Because I think, thank you for that. But I think I would be remiss not to say, plan for the tariffs to come, because Canadians will probably not be the 51st state.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no words. I have no words for that. I mean,
I know that was one of the suggestions as how we could get around it, but I really don't think that's in our top 10.
And I've seen the response from the Canadian side. I mean, they already touched on that. It was, and people are saying he just made a joke, and I'm like, I don't know if politics is the right place to make jokes, but
I think generally people are like, yeah, it was funny, like initially, but it's not so funny anymore.
Yeah, I don't know how Canada feels about it. I don't know how I would feel about it either. I'm like, how about we just put the whole world together and it's just a one country? What about, like, would that also be good? I don't know. How about we don't need visas anymore? We don't need,
Well, I know there'd be some big ticket items that I would be concerned about. Is like, you guys don't have the Caesar drinks down there, so you'd have to get those. The other thing is, like, we have, free cannabis whenever we want it. I wouldn't say free, but we can get it whenever we want. So, like, that would be a challenge for Canadians if we can't get our cannabis whenever we want.
There's a lot. Wow. Yeah. You know what? It's funny because Canada is so close to the US, obviously, you guys are neighbors, but Europe seems more close to what Canada is. And I know you guys have French influence anyways and stuff like that. But it's just when I talk to a Canadian, they seem to have a little bit more of the European side of thinking. And
You also raise a good point. Like, we still have a king here.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. King Charles is our head of state still officially.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not
So,
educated on
there's some
that.
complications around that probably. And, that's part of the joke is who's going to tell the king that he's lost Canada?
Oh my God. Okay, well, guys, you've heard it here first, but there needs to be some fun in this whole thing.
You
Like,
have to. It's the only way to work through it. But again, like, I have so many great American friends, and I heard a very wise man recently say, it's like the relationship part is so important because when you get into situations like this, like, luckily I have so many good relationships that we can obviously joke about it. Like, I come from a family of all teachers, so they don't travel a lot, and they're just like, they don't have American friends, so they just are like, oh my God, it's so scary. Like, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.
Oh, yeah, you have to. That's a really, I mean, I think you have to work through it, but having fun while doing it is just makes it so much better and a little bit of easier, I would say. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on, Kim. And I know we have some future plans with you, and everything is going to happen for the listeners. And, get involved and stay updated with what's going on. We'll put all of this on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us. You can write us on LinkedIn. You can email us. You can call us. You can do anything you want. You can show up at the office. I mean, do whatever you please, what works best for you. And we'll be back next Monday with a different topic. We'll see. No, Trump will not be in office yet, but oh my God, I'm so excited for that because these episodes will just get better and better. And we'll see you on Monday. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Kim, for being here. And we'll see you next time.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading.